You know, a lot of people love Rene because he was Mr. CDBG. He's the one that empowered the community, found resources for our work, and that's fine. But I wanted to say that there's a side to Rene that made me look up to him as a mentor, but today I got a new word just for Rene. I consider him a street saint, and let me explain what I mean. One of the goals of life as I see it, through even religious vision, through the Bible, is bottom line is, in the end, God will judge us all by how we show compassion, love compassion, and do justice. And I think Rene did both quite well. And a little bit of a personal note, I really respected him because he was humble, but also because he really did believe in empowerment and giving voices to our community like ours and others. And one time, this is the best story I remember, all these big shots are in a meeting, you know, planning housing strategy, and you know, all these big shots like Calvin Welch and you know, all that. And all of a sudden, you know, I was silent through the whole meeting. I was just a new community organizer at that time. And he goes, "Shut up and let Norman speak." And I felt so empowered at that moment. So, you know, it's sensitivity culturally and empowering the poor and having the fiscal smarts to put it all together. Let me tell you, this guy did justice and loved compassion. Rene, you are a street saint for the community.
My name is Barbara Blong. I'm at Senior Action Network, where Rene was part of our group, part of our board, and part of our family for many years. I think he came on our board about 2001, and of course he was mostly involved with housing, with our shack program, and Rene was always there for us with the necessary history or the necessary explanation at our monthly meetings when he would talk about, you know, well, this is what's happening downtown, or this is what's happening here, and that's why we have to fight now. So Rene was integral to our process, and we really, really miss him. Rene was helping us plan for the convention we're having in October. We are celebrating 20 years of Senior Action Network, and Rene was with us in the planning process and, you know, deciding that we would call the theme Senior Action Network 20 Years of Action for Social Justice. Rene was a very close friend to all of us on the board. We will miss him very, very much, and our seniors and membership will miss him. Rene was a comrade.
My name is Rene Cazenave. I knew Rene probably dating back to the early 90s, beginning with some of the housing struggles I first got involved in, and since then Rene was a constant and important comrade in those struggles, and it's very difficult to have to be giving this testimony today, but at the same time it's really great to celebrate an incredible life of struggle for justice. I think that for me there are many, many stories to tell about Rene. There are many great moments that I personally had with him. But I think most importantly, some of the things that get overlooked about Rene is that he was a brilliant strategist. He was very clear on his ideological perspectives. He was very clear on how he approached the movement, and he was very clear on his principles, and he never wavered on those principles. And because of that, I think for many of us who came into the movement in the 90s, came into the struggle around displacement, gentrification, and other type of fights that we were having during those years, that Rene became a mentor to many of us, but also most importantly, he became an example of how to do the work, of how to have the integrity, of how to fight and have victories for our people, while at the same time always keeping the eyes on the prize for the liberation of all working and low-income people. And Rene also was a soft and warm person in his own ways to all of us, and really nurtured my leadership in the movement. And I really feel that I wouldn't have been as successful in some of the things that I've done over the years without people like Rene and Bill Soro, who also I could consider two huge pillars and giants of the movement here in San Francisco. So I just want to say, Rene, presente.
Hi, my name is James Tracy. I'm part of Community Housing Partnership and the San Francisco Community Land Trust, two people's organizations which Rene helped build. Rene was an old school Red Star radical community organizer. He dedicated his life to defending San Francisco's working class communities from displacement for over 40 years. If you take a walk around the city, there are thousands of units of affordable housing where people can actually live in the city that they help build every day because of Rene's work, and that's the best possible monument that could ever be built to Rene. We honor Rene. We honor his life by carrying on this work. So Rene, presente.
So I'm Raimi, and I work at Mercy Housing California, and I'm also on the board of Community Housing Partnership and served with Rene on that board for 6 or 7 years. What I really loved about Rene was that he was always pushing us to do more than maybe what we'd want to do, and reminding us that we are part of this bigger community of justice. And he was that glue for me to that world, and I'm really going to miss that. Our whole office is going to miss Rene terribly. We housed the Choo-Choo meetings for many years, and we loved having Rene and Calvin come in and rile us up. And I can't believe that is going to not happen anymore, but we really miss you, Rene.
I'm Sarah Short. I'm the Executive Director of the Housing Rights Committee, and Rene was really important, not just to me personally, but also to our organization. He was a great advisor. His brain was so large in terms of both the history that it contained about the community, but also in terms of the way that he could think strategically and really plan for ways that were effective in terms of community efforts. And a few things about Rene that really strike me as I sit here is that he really had no fear in terms of political struggle. He was not held back by, oh, who might we piss off here, or he really did what he felt was right and righteous. And although he thought strategically and understood things like diplomacy and when to use it, he also just knew when to just push because it was the right thing to do. And the other thing that really will always stick with me about Rene is his sense of humor. I just really, really appreciate it because he had wit, and it was sometimes brilliant wit and sometimes just silly and hilarious wit. But what it did was it really lightened things up in a way that we absolutely need in the work that we do and in the movement towards housing justice and all the political work I think we all did with Rene. It was so important to not just have those breaks with laughter, but also just to know that we're all gonna burn out if we take ourselves too seriously all the time. And I really feel like we had a connection with each other in terms of mixing politics with the lighter side of life. And I really, really miss that part of Rene that was, as serious as hell when it came to, winning the battle, but also just taking the time to laugh. So.
Rene Cazenave was a brother who was extremely unselfish, had no ego. I mean, he gives so much to the community. In fact, as I remember very well, if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have KPOO. He was there in the beginning because Joe Rudolph didn't know anything about what to do. And he called Joe Rudolph, tried to get me in, and he said, well, Rene is here. I said, Rene must be crazy to come get involved with something like this. Rene always came when it was needed. For example, even when Joe Rudolph died in almost 10 years ago, that's on March the 13th, 2001. Rene was right there, and he helped us put together the books and everything. I mean, Rene did so much. He was like a servant, I mean, a real servant of the people. I mean, for example, you can compare him with people like Malcolm X and Che and Harriet Tubman. I mean, you can compare him with people like that because he was so unselfish. He gave himself. He gave so much of himself that sometimes I wonder if he thought about his own health. That would happen sometime. So Rene is definitely a great person who we'll definitely miss. Rene Cazenave is a fantastic human being, and we'll definitely miss him. And I don't know what's going to happen in San Francisco without him because he was involved in so much, and he helped so much keeping things together. He was a fantastic organizer without even being an organizer. So Rene is definitely a person that we're going to miss.
And then can you just say your name and your title?
My name is Terry Collins, and I am the president of KPOO Radio, the radio station that if it wasn't for Rene would not exist today.
My name is Amy Fishman, and I'm currently the Executive Director of East Bay Housing Organizations, an affordable housing advocacy coalition in the East Bay, and formerly the Director of Supportive Housing at Mission Housing Development Corporation for 10 years. And I have so much to say about Rene. He was so fundamental to my whole experience and development, and to me, as to so many of us, he was a mentor, a friend, and a comrade, and so in so many ways has impacted the life of the city of San Francisco and beyond. One thing that is just one of the most important things that I would like to highlight is how much Rene schooled a whole new generation of leaders in San Francisco in social justice movements, and both in electoral struggles and in community organizing. He had this encyclopedic knowledge of the span of history in San Francisco, of social movements, of an analysis of what happened, that he brought people in and developed us all as leaders. And I feel really honored to have been among the kind of new generation of leaders that emerged out of the 90s and the 2000s. So in that way, Rene really served as this wise elder, and at the same time, he was the most unassuming and humble person you could possibly imagine. From when I first met him, I was 24 years old, and I first came out to San Francisco and was gung-ho and doing organizing in community development organizations, engaging affordable housing residents, and building movements and building power to change dynamics in the city. And being young and idealistic, yeah, I brought some of what I had to bring, but Rene didn't take a look at the fact that I was young and didn't have any experience, and just took me on and embraced me as with so many other people. And the way that he made me feel was valued and honored and invited in to the work. And that really began a long relationship where, from carrying these heavy boxes of literature for electoral campaigns all over the city to being in lengthy meetings where he would provide this brilliant analysis, to all of the community celebrations that we were at together. One also area to highlight, which was particular to my generation, was what happened in the late 90s and early 2000s with the community response and fight back against gentrification and displacement. And that's really where I worked very closely with Rene through the development and of the Mission Anti-Displacement Coalition, and the way that he served to guide and shape that new generation of struggle in the Mission District, building upon the decades that had come prior. And just, I guess, some quick memories of different things that I would like to share that particularly stand out is the way that Rene brought in Marxist analysis to just as a way of life, as a way of conversation, as a way of talking about people, and as a way of being loving and relating and honoring of people. He had this depth of analysis that just really was brilliant, and he talked about kind of the objective conditions and strategically assessing what to do in campaigns and how to build towards wins, how to build power, how to build community leadership in that way. And not only in terms of the words and his ideas, but as I mentioned, his kind of muscle of, he had, in a second, he would pick up these, stack 3-4 boxes where we were all carrying one or carrying one up, and he would run up 3 or 4 flights of stairs on a mission. And I guess those are just a few words about my experience of Rene and how much he meant to me, how much he meant to my own leadership development and political and development as an organizer, and how much he meant to all of us and a whole generation of young leaders coming up, being schooled by him, and how much he meant to San Francisco and the city as a whole. He leaves a huge gap in terms of through his loss, and at the same time he has filled that gap with this immense community of people who really loved him, loved working with him, and loved continuing the fight for social justice, racial and economic justice.
My name is Joseph Smook. I'm the executive director at Bernal Heights Neighborhood Center. And when I first met Rene, it was back in about 1993, a long time ago, when I was working with an organization called Innovative Housing. We were working in 5 counties in the Bay Area. And one of the counties we were working in was San Francisco. And in each of the different counties, in order to get affordable housing developments done, what you had to do was go through the city manager or the planning staff or the community development staff of the particular city or county. And in San Francisco, I encountered a unique situation where I was talking with Joel Lipsky, who still is at the Mayor's Office of Housing, and he told me that if I wanted to get a project going, then I needed to go to the Council of Community Housing Organizations, and I should really talk with Rene Cazenave. It was a bit of a strange answer that I was getting from the city, that I had to go to a community-based organization. But once I started going to the meetings, it was apparent that was where the dynamic was in the affordable housing world in San Francisco, and that's really where you needed to be. And we, in fact, got our projects moving. The more I got to know Rene over the years, the more I saw how much he did move in the world of affordable housing. And to him, it wasn't just affordable housing, but it was really true community development in the holistic sense of the phrase. And something that I continued to learn about from him over the years, especially when we served together on the board of the Community Housing Partnership. That was really kind of our most intense time together, where I got to know Rene not just as an activist and a strategist around affordable housing, but as a thinker, as a planner, as a doer, as somebody who made organizations run, as somebody who didn't mind rolling up his sleeves and doing the books, or being the treasurer of the board, being on the finance committee. He wasn't one of those people who thought, well, to be a community organizer or to be a radical, that you're just out there on the street doing actions all the time, but that you, in order to make it legit, in order to make real social change, that you've got to roll up your sleeves and do the hard work. And so that was something that I learned from him over the years, and will probably continue to learn from Rene throughout my life and throughout my work in the community.
My name is Brian Murphy. I was the director of the Urban Institute at San Francisco State for a number of years, and really met Rene through that work. He was an intellectual, a word he would not necessarily have used first, because God knows he was not an academic and had contempt for people who separated their minds from their hearts, or their incredible analytic skills that they might have from serving the people who most needed those skills. And he worked tirelessly to connect that university to this community, and to the people in this community who needed from the university its best work. He was a friend, he was a colleague, He was in all ways a partner that the university, hundreds of its students, benefited from. So I'm really here on behalf of Susan Alunin and Rowena Mamaradlo and Ann Garcia and all of the men and women at the Urban Institute who really, really depended on Rene to organize, to bring people to the classes, always dependable, always smart and engaged and funny. He was he was a deep and real and enduring friend to that great and sprawling institution out there that bemused him and caused him endless annoyance and frustration, and at the same time he never backed off of it. And his insistence that it serve this town. There are people out there who will miss him every year.